Today, you guys are here for Jason and Kim Kotecki. They are best friends, husband and wife, parents of 3 kids, entrepreneurs, authors, retro t-shirt wearers, and partners in crime on a crusade to annihilate adultitis in themselves and the world. The founders of Escape Adulthood, Kim is a former kindergarten teacher and shenanigator. Jason is an artist, professional speaker, and serial aficionado. One of their dreams is to see the word adultitis in the dictionary. Kim and Jason homeschool their 3 weird kids and live right here in Madison, where they enjoy long walks by the lakes and eat way too many cheese curds. Here tonight to share ideas and insights for finding the silver linings amidst the dark clouds that roll into our lives, please join me in welcoming Jason and Kim Kotecki.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight. Thank you to everybody that's online watching. It's great to have everyone here. Well, you know, I want to start out with this idea. Some of you may have seen me present before, and if you have, there's a good chance you've seen this artwork. And that's really a good encapsulation of what tonight is about how do we see things, how do we perceive things. So, you know, in the summer, as we're getting to the end of summer here, we don't have as many of these guys anymore, but if you're a normal adult and you look out your window and you see this, you're freaking out, right? You're like, oh my gosh, an army of weeds has taken over the yard. Got to call the weed guy. This is bad. But if you were a kid, you'd see this exact same thing and you'd see wishes, right? It's the exact same thing. This is flowers for mom. This is a completely different way of looking at the exact same thing. And that's really, like I said, what this is all about is the idea of how do we perceive things, not only the good things, but the bad things that happen to us in our life as well. One of my heroes is this guy. I don't know if anyone remembers him. Bob Ross, who would paint the happy little trees, and he had his happy giant afro, right? And one of his catchphrases that I love is the idea of happy accidents, right? And he'd be painting along, and he'd talk like there's no such thing as doing it wrong, right? There's no mistakes, there's only happy accidents. And I love this concept because as an artist myself, I can relate to this, where I'm working on something, and then my paintbrush slips, or paint falls off my brush, or I smudge something I just spent an hour working on, and my initial gut is like, it's ruined, throw it away, start over, right? But Bob would say, no, man, that's a happy accident. Maybe there's supposed to be a tree right there. Maybe that sky is supposed to be that color. And I'll tell you what, like, when I lean into this philosophy, 99 times out of 100, my painting or whatever I'm working on ends up better than my original vision. But you have to push through that and you have to see the happy accident. So I figure we start off sharing a happy accident in our life, right?
Yeah, so if you guys happen to be getting our Sunday morning emails from Jason, you will know that we are doing studio sneak peeks. So this is a screenshot from one of our studio sneak peeks. Every week, I go down into our studio and I take a 1 or 2 minute video of kind of what's happening in Jason's studio. And it's kind of fun because it kind of forces me to look with new eyes every week too, because my office is right near his studio. And oftentimes I'm kind of just rushing past and going to get what I need. And I kind of miss what's on his easel and what's happening. So it kind of slows me down and forces me to kind of look and see what's coming out of him creatively. So the kids are often jumping in on those, and that's all happening in our studio. But our studio is a happy accident. So a couple years ago, we had moved into this house, and it's a split ranch. And we kind of liked that because we're like, okay, we'll put our offices downstairs, we'll live upstairs. You know, that was when we had 1 kid, so it felt a lot bigger then. But as the time has gone by, there was this kind of weird space in the middle that we didn't know what to do with. The previous owners, it was kind of a living room, but for us, we didn't really use it as a living room. So eventually, we just kind of put boxes there, and it was kind of unused. Well, we started to get some water in the basement. A couple years ago, some of you guys relate to this, it was really wet, right? And so as the rain would come, we'd kind of see spots in the carpet, and we're like, oh man, what's going on? We get the humidifier going, or dehumidifier. We got we were getting nervous about it, of like, we should do something about it. But just as life goes, you just don't really do much. You kind of just keep cleaning it up, right? And we just kept getting more fearful as the time went on of like, this is...
Pretty sure that the kids were going to die of mold cancer of some way.
We still weren't doing anything about it, but we're like, oh, what is happening? So one day we were talking to Jason's dad, and we're like, basically confessing that like we're pretty nervous, like is this going to decline our home value, and what's going on with all this water, and how bad is the leak? Like we didn't want to check behind the paneling, you know. And he's a carpenter, and he was like, all right guys, I'm coming over. He just forced himself in, and he's like, we're just going to pull it back, we're going to take a look and reveal what you guys are so afraid of. And it was, sure enough, like a little hairline fracture in the cement. But he's like, we could do this, you know. He knew exactly what to do, which was amazing for us. And so for about 3 months, our basement was just kind of, we tore up all the carpet, and we were kind of working around this. And he would come when he could and help out, and we eventually pieced it back together. But it was one of those things where like, okay, for 3 months, we're walking through this torn up basement to get to our offices. And I think our subconsciouses were kind of working in us to be like, there's an opportunity here. What are we going to do about this? You know, there's a happy accident. And so what we ended up doing was we redid the floor with like kind of a cement epoxy kind of coating, and we turned it into Jason's new art studio. And at the time, he was doing a lot of digital stuff, kind of transitioning back into more painting. But this allowed for him to start the experiment with oil paints. And so this new floor kind of gave him permission to be messy. And and you don't want to do that with carpet, of course, right? And then we put this, there was like this odds fireplace down there that just kind of, it probably fit when you had a living room, but we didn't have a living room. So we kind of transformed that, put some chairs in front of it, got it fixed so we could, you know, have fires. And now it's like this cool little space that we all enjoy as a family. And it was all because we started to kind of look at things in a new way.
Well, and we got your office there. So we have the fireplace in the middle, my studio painting areas on one side, Kim's office is on the other. And like in the winter when there's a fire going and we're both down there, it's
this
like
is the
heaven.
best room in the house. Now, seriously, probably 3 years of time we just spent kind of worrying about it and just stressing about it and just being frustrated by this challenge. And now it's like the best thing in our house. So it's just kind of a neat reminder of how many times there are opportunities within the challenges. And now, Jason, this is one of Jason's first oil paintings that he did in that space, which is now the cover up of his new book that was just released this past month. This painting kind of represents the concept that, you know, monsoons, the different challenges come in sometimes as monsoons, but if we kind of reframe the way we think about them, we can actually turn them into really awesome opportunities. So, for instance, maybe losing your job turns into the spark that you need to kind of start that passion project or maybe start that business, or the possibility that, you know, an illness can actually bring you closer to the people that you love. So it always kind of gives you a chance to see new opportunities. And this question has been cemented out of all of this, which is, now that this has happened, what does this make possible? So this is kind of the go-to question in our household. A lot of times it takes us a long time to get to that, even though we talk about it. But it is a pretty powerful question for sure. And just last year, you have the next slide for me? We hosted our first VIP studio tour down in that space, the space that we were so frustrated by. We have our annual Escape Adulthood Summit every summer. And the night before, people came into the studio and got to see Jason's work. And we had champagne toast and macaroons and kind of showed them kind of behind the scenes stuff. So it was just kind of a neat culmination of so much that kind of went into that space.
Yeah, but that question, skip back to that just for a second, because this has been a game-changing question for us. And it started out, a friend of mine gave me this. This was sort of a gift, and he would use it. He's also a business owner, and his idea was like whenever he would work really hard on a new thing, whether it was a new book or a new project or something, he'd say, now that I have this, what does this make possible? So it was sort of like the idea of how can I use this work I put in and let it multiply and not have it just be this one-time thing. And so then we started looking at it as like when bad stuff happens that you don't want to happen, which is what life is, right? We have things that come up and are unexpected. When you can get to the point of moving past the anger and frustration and disappointment, which is totally normal, when you get to the point and say, okay, it happened, wish it didn't, but it did, what does this make possible, is a total game changer. Now, again, this whole studio thing has got a happy ending, but I am embarrassed that it took us that long, where there was so much like of the fear and anxiety of, oh my gosh, this could be bad, and is, you know, is like they say, false evidence appearing real. That's what fear is, right? False evidence appearing real. So we're still a work in progress with this, and sometimes you do have those things in life where you're just sort of in this storm, right? So this is one of my newer paintings. It's in my Angry Birds series. This to me represents a period of my time where I spent 7 years creating a comic strip that wasn't successful. Now, that's not exactly fair to say. It's a little overdramatic. There were fans and people liked it and we made a little bit of money, but it never got syndicated. We never were able to make as much money as we needed to support ourselves. And there came a point where the writing was on the wall, that I had to give it up because my speaking career was starting to take off and I didn't have as much time for a daily comic strip. And so it was probably one of the hardest things I'd ever done because I was so sure that this was going to be it. This, like Kim and Jason, this comic strip was going to be up there with Peanuts and Calvin and Hobbes and Far Side.
And actually, back up a little bit, because people who don't know it, which, you know, you just said it wasn't successful, so maybe people don't know what it is, right?
Well, of course they don't, because it wasn't successful.
I know. But it was very personal. So Jason drew the strips or Jason created the characters, Kim and Jason, as a way to kind of win my heart when we were dating. So
that part was successful.
Yeah. So there you go, right? So the characters would turn up on little anniversary cards, and he made a whole calendar for me the one year, which is actually kind of where the business came from, because I would show people the calendar at work or whatever, and they're like, this is really cute. He should do more with this. And, you know, it would show different people, and people would encourage him. And then the strip kind of came from there.
Yeah, and I had this identity that, you know, it started very personal, but then it was like, okay, people were responding to it, and we really felt called that we wanted to help people see life more like the way we did when we were kids. And I thought this was the vehicle to do that. And so it was very tied up with my identity in this thing, but it just, you know, it was hard to let go of because it had been 7 years of being in a cramped apartment with no air conditioning, writing strips, sitting down trying to come up with jokes even when no jokes were coming, and throwing, you know, spaghetti against the wall to try to figure out ways to get it out there and all that. And it just came to a point. It was January 27, 2007 is when I published my last strip. And I was really, I knew it was time to do that, but it was hard. It was hard to see something that I had dreamed about not come to fruition. And at that moment, I told myself a lie that, well, they always tell you that you can't make money as an artist, so this is just proof of that. So move on and do this other thing that is working. Later, as the thing went on, I started to realize something, that sometimes your dream is not your real dream. Let me explain that. Oh, here's the olden days. So look at how clean my art table is there. That's pretty amazing.
The kids probably don't even recognize it.
Yeah. So I was caught up in this idea that my dream was to create a comic strip and to make that be known. And I realized that my dream was not actually to create a comic strip. My dream was to inspire, entertain, and encourage people to renew their childlike faith and believe in their dreams. The comic strip was just one way of doing that. I realized that this thing that seemed like a failure was actually the foundation of everything else. I learned that sometimes you have to let go of the structure of your dream in order to achieve the spirit of your dream. So for example, if your dream is to have a cross-country road trip, some big adventure, is it really that big of a deal if you have to trade in your Harley for a Corvette? Or if you have to start from the East Coast versus the West Coast when you're planning on the other, right? It was a big catalyst for me to realize that what I get to do now and the art that I create now is very different from what I started doing, but I could never have imagined toiling away in that little apartment, the work and the opportunities that we have now. I would have never believed that that was even possible. And so it's really cool to see how things has transpired. And like I said, the structure of the dream looks a little bit different, but the spirit is still alive and well. And all those things that I thought were failures, which is why I can joke about it, it wasn't successful. Like, I don't really believe that, because it was successful, because everything I learned, the discipline to sit down and do the work for those 7 years, the things I learned as I was getting ideas out of my head onto paper, those characters that I created were sort of like the ambassadors that pulled me through to where we are now, to know what we need to share with people. All of the spaghetti throwing of trying business models and trying things, like, we learned so many things from that we wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for all that effort. And so ultimately, the reality is that sometimes life doesn't go the way we thought. Sometimes the dream we have crumbles around us, and we can be like this guy, where we're kind of frustrated and angry and disappointed. And I think that's okay. I think that's part of the process. I'm not one of those people that think you should just push down the emotions and say everything is perfect, everything will be fine, right? Like, it's okay to feel the hurt sometimes. But the more quickly that you can pick yourself up and say, okay, this structure of the dream is gone, but know that the spirit is still alive and well. And that when we can look around and see maybe we're supposed to be going in a different direction, or see an opportunity that we didn't even realize was there, that's the little nudge that we need to get up and soar again.
One quick thing before we move on. So we've been reading the comic strips lately to our kiddos who are here tonight, Lucy, Ben, and Rose. And so they're totally starting to understand that the strip characters are us, in terms of the little nuances and our interests and things like that. So they're definitely getting to those ages that are really kind of fun to introduce that to them, or reintroduce it to ourselves. And the thing that is most surprising to me is how all the little lessons in the comic strip that Jason wrote for 7 years are basically the same things we're saying now. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. This is exactly what we're doing right now. It's just a totally different way we're doing it now. So that was a little surprise to me as I've been reading them, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're going to tell the Shine On story. So I don't know, has anyone in here heard this story, heard us tell it? We've only told it. Amy? Okay. This is kind of an interesting one. So a few years ago now, about 2 years ago, we had...
You've actually only ever told us once.
One time, okay.
In front of people.
Right,
so.
Okay. So Jason and I grew up in Illinois, and we moved up here to Wisconsin. And, you'd think after a whole lifetime of being in the Midwest that the winters would get easier. But as you guys know...
Somehow we're still surprised that it's cold.
The whole polar
What's with
vortex,
this cold?
So usually in February, we try to sneak away to someplace warm. And being homeschoolers, we just leave, we're not asking anybody's permission, we're just going. And so it's been Florida, in the past, but some friends of ours who are savvy travelers convinced us to go down to Acamel in Tulum, Mexico. Have you guys, anybody got experience with that? So it's about an hour and a half south of Cancun, and it's beautiful, blue water, gorgeous, and we were getting really excited. We're, anticipating, my theory, and I'm sure Jackie and John can agree with this, anticipating is almost more fun than the trip, right? As you get closer and closer. So as it was getting closer, I'm starting to pack and get ready to get everybody ready. I go to pull up the weather down there just to see we're going to need tank tops. And the whole time we were down there, it was showing that it was going to be thunderstorms. And now this was end of January, so I'm like, oh man, I was pretty upset about this. But I
We
mean,
had the worst. We had a rough, like, holiday with
yes,
everyone
we had
was
the flu for
sick.
3 weeks. We missed Christmas with our families, and so we were just coming off on zero tanks. We're like, we need this to get the sun, and so as I kept packing, I'm like, okay, just start praying. I had a few praying friends. I'm like, we're just praying for the sun. We're praying for the sun. And I checked the weather, as it got closer, and it's still all thunderstorms, like thunderstorms the whole week. I'm like, well, what are the chances, And so I was getting anxious and Jason was picking up on this pretty quickly.
Yeah, I didn't need to check my weather app anymore because she was like, it's like 24/7 ticker going on.
It's still
like,
thunderstorm, yeah.
I was nervous too, right? I mean, we were really looking forward to this. We were all, geared up. You can see
This
the
is
snow
us leaving
on the ground.
Madison,
Here's us in the Madison airport, ready to go.
Yeah.
And we were on the plane, and I'm reading some stuff. And of course, I'm sure it probably goes without saying, what we're sharing here tonight is our experience. We're not expecting that anyone will have the same views on some of these things, but we're just kind of sharing where we're coming from. And I was reading this book, and it said something about God is a living God, and it made me took me aback because I actually went to Catholic school, and one of the things that happened to me is like religion class was just sort of like every other class. So religion was kind of like just like history, and it was like, oh yeah, God did really cool things a long time ago. That's really awesome. And it just sort of struck me of like, God is a living God. And so then all of a sudden I just had this piece like, everything's going to be fine, right? And when I say that, I don't mean like, oh, God will change all of the weather of the Northern Hemisphere just for us, right? But I was sort of like, he knows we've had a bad stretch here. He knows how bad we need this. He knows like what we're going through. Like he could just go like and move clouds just a little bit on one day, like give us one day of sunshine, something like that. So I, trying to be helpful, told Kim, like, Kim, don't need to worry about this. It's going to be fine. It's totally fine. Quit checking your phone. It's totally going to be fine.
Which was really annoying, by the way.
To be fair, like, I had no proof. It was not like I could look at my phone, like, see, my phone says sunshine. Like, I didn't have that. So we just went into it.
Yes. So the first, we kind of took one of those late flights, so we got a hotel in Cancun. We were just going to drive down to Acapulco the next day, which, by the way, looking back on, was one of the worst nights ever. We had like 2 queens or 2 double beds, and we were just going to put the little one on the floor. Well, we got into the room, and it was tile. And so then you're like reassessing very quickly as the parents. I'm like, well, she's not going to sleep on the tile, So double bed with me.
And there was water on the floor from the air conditioning for some reason. So that,
right.
And I was still like, you're little. I was little before. You sleep on the floor. It's just how it goes.
What tile? Welcome to Mexico. Yeah, it was a little rough. So the night of sleep going into the next day was a little rough. I think at one point the 4-year-old was like caressing my cheek in the middle of the night, which sounds adorable, but it's totally not, not at 3 a.m. So we woke up a little tired, but I looked at the phone that morning at breakfast, and I'm like, okay, it looks like the clouds are going to clear. We might have like a clear afternoon. Let's hurry up and get down there, and then we'll just get checked in, and then we'll go right to the beach. And, so we're like, hurry. So we raced down there. I got a speeding ticket. No joke, in Mexico, which I don't recommend. And so once we got to the condo, we're like, oh, this is great.
Let's go enjoy the water.
Hurry. Get the sunscreen on. Get your blowy, arms and everything. So we get out there, and it was a little rushed and hectic. Have you guys ever done the whole like hurry up and rest mentality, right? That's kind of how that day went. But we did have a little moment out there where we're like, okay, this was good. I can hear the waves. The kids are playing in the sand, and just being grateful. So the next night, or that night, we went to bed.
I didn't say I told you so either. Didn't
but
say
he did kind
anything
of have
like
that look that, it says it all. So, so the next day we got up, and again, it was kind of like, oh, it looks like it might be partly cloudy, but it doesn't look like the rain's actually going to hit us. So again, go, go, go. We go out, but we were like way more chill. We were like starting to breathe deeper. The kids were getting really into the sand and the play, and we took our little snorkels out and saw some fish, and all of a sudden, like, it was getting a little easier, right? But the rest of the week still looked rainy, so I was just having that balance of like, okay, if this is all we get, then we're still gonna have family time, we'll figure it out. I'm still texting friends, keep praying for sun, it's coming, it's working, But we were kind of easing into it. Okay, so day 3, we ended up at the monkey sanctuary, and we were holding parrots and snakes, and monkeys were on our heads, and it was really cool. At this point, we were like, okay, we were getting what we came for. This is filling our cups. We're having great experiences. And we were just totally in a better vibe, not as anxious, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Day 4 came, and by the way, the week was still showing all thunderstorms. But every day, day 4, we woke up, it was cleared out. So we went to the beach again. Day 5, night before, it looked rainy, cleared out again. Like, it was like every day was exactly kind of what he had said on the plane ride down, where it was like just a little whew, and it just cleared out. So by day 6 and 7, which was like our last days there, we were just like, what just happened? This was like the most relaxing week of our lives.
And it did rain, to be fair.
Yeah.
It rained on the day we went to the Tulum ruins, and it was hot. And we were like grateful for the rain. It was like, yay, rain!
It's like 10 minutes of rain, and it cooled us off, which was almost a joke. We're like, I can't believe this. This is the rain we got right when we need it, So we were just we had a really interesting time assessing this in our own selves, especially because we talk about this stuff for a living, right? Of like your attitude and how you address things and how you handle things. And we were learning it firsthand again and again that whole week as trying to let things go and let it be what it would be. And as the week wound down, our cups were so filled, and we had some great conversations about it all. And I was like, you know what? I think I really want a sunshine souvenir. And I want something like that we can bring home and just look at that and remember the gift of this week, remember the gift that filled the sunshine, filled our cups in such a way. And we didn't think it was going to be here, but it came. There was just so many metaphors and lessons and all of that. So we started looking at the souvenir shops, and nothing was hitting just right. And I'm like, maybe I just need to carry that sunshine with me, and just remember that the gift was sunshine, like literally. So that's kind of where we ended our trip.
So then that we thought that was a really good happy ending, and then we came home, and we flew through Minneapolis, and by the time we got home, it was close to midnight, and so we got at the airport, we got an Uber home. The kids were almost all the way asleep. Ginny, the youngest, she was totally asleep. And we pull into our driveway, and we saw that there were a bunch of police officers canvassing the street. And I don't know if it was because we were just too tired to think much about it. We also have someone in the neighborhood who's a little bit of a juvenile delinquent, and we're like, what did he do this time? We're just kind of like, we didn't really think that much of it. So we collect all the kids, we're bringing all the bags, we get into the house, and I turn on the lights, and I look, and I see on our ceiling that there's like this gouge, like this, and I'm like, what in the heck? What's going on? What happened to our ceiling? Well, I follow it, and it pointed to the window, the front window, and I realized that there was a bullet hole right in the front window. And this bullet had gone through the window and hit the ceiling and created this mark. And I was like, Kim, go tell the police officers that we have a bullet hole in our window. So she goes out. My first reaction is I'm just like mad, right? I'm like, I just want to go to sleep. That's all I want to do right now, right? That's all I could think about. And then it occurred to me of like, wait, that's a bullet. Like, what if we were home? What if I was here? What if my kids were here? And then all of a sudden I started to freak out and get worried and anxious and all this stuff. So then it's just a matter of, we're trying to get the kids kind of into bed and comfort them. And the police officer coming in, they're like, do you have a ladder so we can investigate this? I was like, yeah,
like
I'll just pull out a
12:30.
ladder. And they're, pulling the bullet out of the ceiling, and it's all mangled, so it's pretty useless. And there's glass all over the place. And it was just like this feeling of being invaded, feeling of helplessness, feeling of confusion, all of the sort of stuff. So that's kind of what we came home to.
Yeah. And so we got the kids to bed, which was confusing. I mean, they were half asleep anyway, but then the come home to all this was just really tough, right? By the time I closed their door, it was like 1 a.m, and I went to the living room, and it was just literally, it was a double pane, like half circle window above our main window, and I can't believe how many pieces of glass there were. It was just like little dots of glass, like across the room on the piano, and but I noticed as I was starting to vacuum that nothing got damaged in that room.
Except the ceiling.
Except for the ceiling, which, who cares, right? But there's Jason's paintings hanging in the room, our piano, our TV, just stuff like that. It's a living room. And nothing got hit except for the ceiling, and that's where the bullet stayed. And we're like, wow, that's kind of amazing. So certain things I'm processing as I'm vacuuming and vacuuming and vacuuming. And it was hard to go to sleep that night. I was worried about our neighbors. They told us there were about 10 shots fired on our street, but they didn't know what, the cops were so great, but they didn't have any answers. They just kind of showed up after the fact and were trying to get accounts from neighbors, and they heard 10 shots, and one landed in our window. And
wasn't especially helpful when they just said, like, yeah, this is always historically one of the safest neighborhoods. Like, it's really weird. I'm like, yeah, weird. That's great.
Yeah.
That makes me feel good right now,
Yeah. No, but later we'll tell kind of how that ended up, but it was really interesting. So I went to bed, and I was anxious to get up the next morning and start talking to neighbors, because we're pretty close with our neighbors, and just wanted to find out if everybody was okay and what the situation was. So as I'm, kind of watching to see when the neighbors were opening their blinds and stuff, the kids started getting up, and we're answering questions. And, of course, the day after you get back, you got laundry, and you're trying to figure out, we got to get the mail back, and all this kind of stuff. And so as we started talking to neighbors, I started to see the blessings, because, basically our houses are pretty close on the street. Our neighbor just next door to us, who are pretty quiet, private people, we don't see them very often. I went knocking, and I'm like, what happened to you guys last night? And they said, their 3 daughters were in the front room watching a movie when the shots were fired. So literally the front window of their house had their 3 daughters in it. Across the street, the son, who's a college-age kid, was watching a movie in his front window. And our poor neighbor right across the street, who's our adopted grandmother, she's a widow, she lives by herself. She thought this was coming at her. She was just terrified. It just felt so close, and she was sure that her house was covered in bullets, But the one story that hits the most hard was the one right, next to her across the street. And this is kind of a newer family to the neighborhood. She was on her couch in the front window nursing her 2-month-old. And she literally took the baby and covered the baby on the carpet, because it feels like it's coming right at you, no matter what. It's so close. So it was just one of those things where, after we talked to everybody, we realized the entire neighborhood was filled with people except for our house. On a Friday night in January, we weren't in our living room. And that's pretty rare. I mean, we do travel a lot, but oftentimes we end up back on Friday night. And so it was one of those, our house was empty, and that was where it ended up going. So we're like, man, there's got to be something to that just hit us pretty hard. The other thing that came from this was a neighbor showed up, and he's like, he's around the corner. He's like, I'm a former police officer, and I just want to get people together at the house. I'm going to have a police officer come over, and we're going to have a meeting tomorrow, and let's just get the word out and just have a conversation about this and help ease people's fears. So
talk about how we can make our neighborhood safer and things like that.
And get some answers if there are any, and just share what we already knew, but to help everybody feel better. So literally a day later, Jason's parents came over and stayed with the kids, and we went over to their basement, and there was like 50 of us from our neighborhood. And it was totally one of those things where we're like, oh, now what house are you from? And hey, are you, yeah. And, and it was just so cool to see everybody coming together and looking out for one another, and people are sharing stories of what they thought happened and saw. But more than anything, the focus was almost taken off of that and just on community. Here we were, an opportunity in the end of January to talk with neighbors, to ask, what's your name again? And, oh, you're at that house. And it really brought us all together in a way that, we learned we should all keep our lights on and do this and that, which we all kind of felt better about. And you could kind of see people doing those things, so you kind of felt like you were united in this effort to like feel better and keep our neighborhood safe and watch out for one another. But since then, the neighborhood association has started back up, and they're having meetings, and they had a cookout. We weren't able to go to it, but they had a cookout just a couple weeks ago, which these things weren't in place before. It just kind of had gone to the wayside because the people who were in charge, moved away and that sort of thing. So it was really powerful to see the community come together and just to see the support and to see the blessings, for sure. The other thing on that day is Ben, we were cleaning up.
Day after.
Yeah, the day after. Ben was walking down the hallway. He's like, hey, Mom, what's this? Sure enough, he hands me another part of a bullet. And it was about 2 feet from their bedroom door. So the bullet got lodged in the ceiling, but then part of it broke off and kept going down our hallway. So again, the emotions started to really hit of like, this was 2 feet from my kid's bedroom door, And as Jason will say, I was just an emotional roller coaster.
I don't know that I've ever seen her cry that much in her whole life. It was just like,
it was just a really weird combination of gratitude and then just the unknowns of all that and just feeling violated, I think. But the gratitude of like, not everybody can get a happy ending from something so bad. And people kept asking, the question that got really surprising because it was asked so much was like, oh, did you guys sleep there that night? And I said, yeah, because we weren't there for any of the trauma. We kind of showed up after. So we didn't hear the glass break. We didn't hear the 10 shots. So it was definitely one of those interesting gifts that we were spared all of the emotional chaos that went with that. And we could just kind of come in and clean it up. And we had full cups to do it.
Well, and the interesting thing was, I'd said we'd gone through Minneapolis, and we got stuck on the runway getting de-iced. And that took 45 minutes. And had we not had to do that, which of course is another thing at the time, you're like, why does it take so long to de-ice? We'll be fine. I'm sure it's a short flight. Let's just go for it. We can do it. And like, you're frustrated, right? But if we would not have had that, we would have been home then. Right. So that was another thing, like after the fact, all these things. But it's funny because like a few humorous things that I thought of as you were telling that is like, so we had to, we had this window, and the window wasn't all shot out. It was just this hole. But it was January, so I'm like, I barely can put in a light bulb. So I'm like, well, I'll just get some cardboard and put some tape around it, and I guess that'll be okay. And so that we basically had that for several weeks or months. But it was probably at least 3 days before our youngest came out and looked at the window and was like, what happened up there? So I don't know if we had done it, she was sleeping when we got there.
We didn't make a big deal out of it.
We did a good job of shielding them a little bit. The other thing I think about is you talk about our elderly neighbor and how she thought that the attack was coming to her house. I'm like, what does she have going on there? This 80-year-old woman that she thinks her house is the target for this.
She's got some skeletons.
What's going on? So I have to ask her about that. What she got going on?
We haven't fully teased her enough about that.
No. Yeah. So it was, as you can imagine, very, very emotional. And we finally, again, it took a while, but we finally got to where we said, okay, this happened. What does this make possible?
First of all, we should say they did catch the people. So yay, Madison police. Okay, so it was a 14 and 16-year-old who were joyriding, And they had been, this was not a new thing about a year and a half ago. This was happening around the city, if you guys watch the news. But this was a fun thing, and they actually taped themselves on their phones, which is part of the way they got caught. So thank you for that. But yeah, they did get caught, and the investigators kept us in the loop, and it was pretty cool to see how that worked. So
yeah, I wasn't expecting that, because I'm like, I don't
yeah.
know how you're going to be able to find who did this or whatever. But yeah, so we finally got to the point, and that it makes me think of my brother was in an improv group, and he was pretty good at it. And one of the things when we'd go watch him that I noticed, like, people who weren't good at it, it wasn't because they weren't talented, it was because they didn't embrace the #1 rule of improv, which is yes and. So when you're doing improvisation and you're just throwing out ideas, if someone says, hey, your shoes are made out of marshmallows, and if you say, no, they're not, they're normal shoes, they're totally fine, like the skit just like dies. So there's like nothing funny. You have to say yes, you have to accept it, and then say and. So you say, yes, I do have marshmallows for shoes, and they help me jump over cars, and then it keeps it going, right? And I think that technique that's good for improv is also very similar to what we're talking about here, is when stuff happens to you, yes, this happened. It doesn't do any good to wish it didn't, or to pretend like it didn't, or to be in denial. We can be upset about it, but it's still, when we can say yes and, like, yes, we have a leak in our basement, and it allows us an opportunity to create an even better basement and studio than we had before, right? So, again, this was an emotional time, and it took us a while. We had that stupid cardboard on the window for a long time, and we finally got to where we're like, okay, what does this make possible? So we look at this window, this space, and a few years earlier, we had been in Santa Barbara, California, and we had rented a home-away place, and it had, in this house, there was all these really cool stained glass window things, and it looked like they were really intentional about it. I don't know if the owner was a stained glass window artist or they just collected it, but we always thought it was like really added a lot of charm to this house. So we looked at this shape, as like Kim said, it's a half circle, and I'm like, you know what that reminds me of is a sun. And wouldn't it be cool if when we replace this window, if we got a stained glass window? And could that even work, right? Now, I don't know anything about stained glass windows, but I know how to draw. So I'm like, I could draw something, and then I could find someone who knows how to do the hard part, right? And I drew this little sketch. This is what I started with, just this little thing.
Our church is kind of on the new side. It was about 10 years old, and every, year or so, there would be like new stained glass windows going in. And the pastor would be telling everybody, Rick Findora from Lodi, he put in another picture or another window, and we're like, these are gorgeous, And so this is kind of subconsciously happening for several years before this moment. And I'm like, there's a guy from Lodi. I know, so I'm like, why don't I call the church and just see if they'll give me his name? I'm like, who's doing all these beautiful windows? And they're like, oh yeah, here's his number. And so I'm like, okay, let's just call him.
Does he do non-churches?
Yeah. And we're like, is this going to be like $10,000? We had no idea. We're like, let's just find out.
$10 million.
So he came over to the house, and we both instantly liked him a lot. And we're just like, okay, this is good. This could be really cool. And so Jason worked on the sketch, and we brought it to Rick, and he was like, I think we can do this, So this is how it turned out. And excitedly, Rick is here tonight. So if you want to give a little wave,
up,
Rick. Yeah. But it definitely is one of those things that, as soon as we had the idea, it's like, oh, I hope this works, because this is like the best sunshine souvenir I could ever imagine.
Have this happen.
Right.
You would have had to figure out how to get $10 million to pay for it. But yeah, this is what it looks like from the outside. And that kind of our idea with the whole thing was, not only does this our sunshine souvenir, but then this will be a beacon to the neighborhood, and it'll be a symbol for everyone else to know, remind us of the good that has come out of it, and that we're a community, and the sunshine thing.
Yeah, and shortly after we put it in, we were kind of telling people and that sort of thing. And the neighbor who had hosted that meeting, the wife of the police officer, she sent me a little message and she said, it's such a beautiful reminder for all of us that even in the most, darkest moments, we have light that comes from it. And she's like, that will always remind us of that, because that was something that I think people took ownership of with us, that it was a hard time.
Yeah.
So the ultimate lemonade out of lemons kind of thing. So
yeah, and cool. I think the thing for me is like it's a little bit hard to talk about because we made out really good, and sometimes bullets don't miss. Sometimes vacations get rained out, right? And it's what I think for me the bigger thing is that when we have the sunny days, that those are there to recharge us, to know that when the dark times do come, that the sun is still there, that even on the cloudiest, darkest, worst day, you might not be able to see it, but it's there. It's just hidden. The sun doesn't just disappear. It's there, and the light is there. And I think that we have those highs in our lives to help carry us through the low times sometimes. And that's why sometimes the highs are such a blessing. It's not just because of right then and we're enjoying it, but it's sort of a reservoir for us to move forward. And like I said, a lot of it is up to us of how are we gonna take this? Are we gonna say, yes, this happened? You don't have to be happy about it, but it happened, yes, and what's next? So one other thing is, Kim had mentioned earlier about my Sunday morning messages. We get a lot of notes from people that they say they get it Sunday morning and it's the first, they love to get it with a cup of coffee, and it's their kind of first thing, which is really gratifying for me to hear people enjoy it. But it's basically a little letter, and it's a reminder, and it usually has some of my new art on it, and these sorts of things are what I'm talking about, lessons I'm learning along the way. And if you're interested in that, I'm sure there are a lot of people already on the list here, but if you're interested in it, the little cards that were at your spot that look like bookmarks that have a little piece of art at the top, there's a tear-off portion, and you just put your name and email and give it to me or Kim before you head out, and we'd love to get you, it's totally free, get you signed up and joined to our merry band of adultitis fighters. If you're watching online and you'd like to be a part of it, just go to escapeadulthood.com/newsletter, and that will be a place to do that too. Trying to think if there's anything else of the business, but I don't think so.
No, but I think this is the last week for the exhibit, the Power of Play exhibit. Jackie reminded me of that. So if you haven't went and grabbed a bunch of Jason's artwork off the wall, there's 10 or so different pieces that is just free for everybody. So feel free to grab those and stick them in places that are good reminders as well.
Just to kind of put a bow on it, I think the last sort of thing we want to share is I think there's two lessons that we learn from all of this. Is the first one is to always look for the light. Like I said, even if it's a rainy day, it's a cloudy day, the sun doesn't disappear. It's there. It's still there. And if you're going through a rough time right now, I'm sure there are people right here, maybe watching, that are going through a struggle right now. And all I want to say is just don't give up. Hang in there. Look for the light. I've found from experience that the people who see silver linings are the ones who tend to be looking for them. And the second thing that I think is important lesson is be the light for others. You don't know what other people are going through. Sometimes people are going through a lot and they lash out in ways that aren't especially pretty. And sometimes we're on the receiving end of that, and we don't exactly know what that's about, but it feels pretty hurtful to us. And I think that when we can, be kind and be the light for others, you don't know what little acts of kindness can do for people, and what little things can make such a difference for people that we don't even realize. And so instead of, looking at people that we disagree with and calling them names on Facebook, maybe call them up for coffee and have a discussion and say, you know, it's one of the things I've noticed. I try not to watch the news because the news is all about what's terrible that's happening. Whenever Kim and I are on the news, it's like at the very, very end. It's like the happy thing that's in the last 30 seconds after they've got done like telling you all the terrible things that have happened. But it's they want to pit us against each other and all that. And one of the beautiful things that I've experienced in traveling around speaking and going to different places is to see how the same we are. That people, we want the best for our families. We want the best for our country. We want the best for our world. Sometimes we disagree on the best way to do that, but we're a lot more alike than we are different. And I think that when we can be kind to one another, be open to one another, and just shine our light with other people, that's kind of what this world needs more than anything else. So the last thing I'll say is that when it comes to light and darkness, the darkness doesn't stand a chance. The light always wins. So go out and shine on. Thank you, guys.